They watched the human catch a plasma bolt mid-air, then realized their gods lied about limits. The timing gate clicked twice when biology said it should have clicked once. Then every light around the human cadet turned red. Acting Standards Marshal Corin D. Hal stared through the measure hall glass while the result locked itself across his tablet. A human exchange cadet had just completed the branch response course beyond a limit the Cadris Institute treated as fixed. The result was not merely high. According to the system, it should not exist. The girl stood alone inside the circular test floor. Myra Holt, human, 19 years old, and based on the first run, apparently faster at choosing between danger paths than the Academy's model allowed a natural mind to be. Corin touched the raised edge of his standards tablet. The small motion usually settled him. It did not. A green maintenance symbol flashed beneath the result. That was the wrong detail. If the gate had failed, the maintenance system should have marked a timing fault. Instead, every part of the test had reported normal function. Myra looked through the glass. Did I pass? Corin muted the hull before answering. No. She nodded once. Not angry, not shocked. Just waiting. That annoyed him more than protest would have. He opened the full timing record. The course had shown Myra a set of rescue paths, blocked exits, changing hazard lights, and moving casualty markers. Each new cue forced the cadet to choose whether to keep moving, change course, or stop. The test did not measure raw reflex. That was important. Any animal could twitch. The Institute measured the time between seeing a problem and committing to the correct action. Across every species in the Academy record, that delay could be pushed only so far. Myra had crossed it. Corin replayed the run. Again, the human did not look fast. That was worse. She did not snap from point to point. She did not jerk towards signals before they appeared. She moved with the plain economy of someone walking through a room she already understood. Corin slowed the display. One rescue route opened. Myra ignored it. Another flashed green. She ignored that too. A floor panel warned of a pressure breach. She turned before the scoring system marked the final route as safe. Corin froze the image. There. Her foot had shifted before the last cue finished. He leaned closer. Illegal prediction feed. External signal. Hidden implant. Those were possible. A natural exception was not. He opened her exchange record. Human baseline data scrolled past. The Institute had little reason to treat humans as special. Earth produced strong gravity, wide weather swings, heavy disease loads, and a great deal of cultural noise about survival. Interesting. Not unique. Every species believed its homeworld had made it tough. Then the same limits appeared when tested properly. Corin had built a career around that fact. Behind the glass, Myra raised one hand. Corin opened the channel. Is there a problem? I was wondering if I should stay in here. Yes. Okay. She lowered her hand. That was all. Corin looked back at the impossible result. The lights remained red. The score remained unchanged. And the maintenance mark remained green. For the first time that morning, Corin stopped trying to prove the machine had failed. He began wondering which part of the test had lied. If you have ever trusted a rule because it survived every challenge before you, this was the dangerous part. Not when the rule broke, but when the evidence refused to admit it had. Corin ordered the hall sealed for manual review. Myra sat down on the floor. She crossed her legs. Then she pulled a small cloth sleeve from one pocket. Corin frowned. Security should have cleared all personal gear before the test. He enlarged the image. Myra opened the sleeve and removed a short brass tool with a spring jaw and a thin engraved scale along one side. Not electronic, not connected, not approved Academy equipment. Corin unmuted the channel. Cadet Holt. She looked up. What is that? She held it where he could see. Timing caliper. That was not listed as test equipment. It isn't test equipment. Then why do you have it? My grandfather, S. Corin stared at her. That explained nothing. What does it do? Measures short mechanical intervals. We have timing systems. I noticed. The answer was so mild that Corin could not decide whether she had insulted him. Put it away. Myra closed the brass jaws with a tiny click. Sure. The sound reached Corin through the floor microphones. Simple. Mechanical. Almost absurd inside the most advanced response academy in that sector. Corin marked the object as irrelevant personal equipment. Later, that choice would bother him more than the failed test. At the time, it felt obvious. He reopened the certification file and issued a formal hold. The door to the measure hall unlocked. Myra stepped out carrying the cloth sleeve. Corin met her in the review bay. Up close, she looked even less remarkable. Compact frame. No extra eye structures. No visible balance organs. No secondary sensory pits. Sathri responders had thin jaw membranes that helped with pressure and motion cues. Other species carried broad ear fans, split pupils, or nerve ridges along the neck. Humans had none of those. Myra had 2 eyes, 2 ears, ordinary hands, and a face that suggested she was wondering whether lunch would still be served on time. Corin handed her the hold notice. Your advanced response certification is suspended pending review. Myra read it. Do I still have afternoon navigation? Corin paused. Yes. Good. That is your concern. I already did the homework. Corin's jaw membranes tightened before he stopped them. He touched his tablet again. Cadet Holt, your score crossed a biological boundary supported by the largest response sample this institute maintains. Myra looked back at the test floor. Maybe I got lucky. You made every branch correctly. Lucky in a very organized way. Corin ignored that. He brought up the academy model between them. A series of layered curves filled the display. These are the 9 ceilings. Myra looked at them. Corin continued. They are not speed limits in the crude sense. They describe where natural coordination begins losing accuracy under competing demands. So the brain gets too many good choices, too many urgent choices, and slows down. Yes. Myra studied the curves. Corin waited for the usual reaction. Exchange cadets often tried to argue from pride. Their species had faster hunters, stronger soldiers, better pilots, more dangerous weather, older wars. None of that mattered. The Institute had tested 412 sentient lineages under the same broad response model. Every one of them eventually reached the same kind of collapse. Some reached it sooner, some later, but all reached it. That number had weight at Cadris. It was printed in faculty texts, recited in certification lectures, built into response software. Corin did not need faith in the 9 ceilings. He had data. Myra pointed at one of the curves. Where are humans? Your population sample is incomplete. So you don't know. We know enough. That sounds different. Corin's fingers stopped on the tablet. There it was. Not defiance. Not even argument. Just a small sentence placed exactly where he did not want it. He enlarged the species comparison chart. The underlying limit is not species-specific. Myra looked at him. Corin stated the assumption as plainly as he could. Variation exists beneath a ceiling. It does not erase the ceiling. Myra glanced back through the glass at the red test lights. Then she checked whether the brass caliper in her sleeve was fully closed. Okay. Corin waited. She looked at him. Want me to do it slower? For several seconds, Corin said nothing. His jaw membranes pulled a fraction toward his throat. He forced them flat. You will repeat the assessment. Thought so. With independent timing hardware. Fine. With a control responder. Also fine. With security screening before entry. Myra looked at the cloth sleeve. Are you taking Grandpa? The tool stays outside. It doesn't need permission from a battery. Corin stared at her. Myra seemed to realize he did not know whether that was a joke. She put the sleeve on the review table. There. Happy. No. Okay. Corin summoned the secondary timing team. This was no longer a normal certification dispute, but he still knew what it was. A sensor problem. A test design problem. A calibration problem. Perhaps, at worst, a human-specific quirk that sat near the edge of the accepted range. What it could not be was a broken law of biology. That belief had a name in the Institute's own error code system. Normalcy bias. Bias 3. The assumption that a boundary found across enough examples must be nature itself. Corin would later read that definition with a very different face. For now, he believed it described other people. The secondary team arrived with standalone clocks and fresh gate modules. Behind them came senior responder Heron Voss, one of the best Sathri field cadets at Cadris. Corin had chosen him for a reason. Heron was fast enough to make weak performers look clumsy. More important, his scores were boring. Perfectly, beautifully boring. They landed where the 9 ceilings said elite biology should land. Myra watched him into the test floor. That the control? Yes. He looks annoyed. He interrupted a rescue command, practicum to be here. So yes. Corin did not answer. Heron took position. The gates reset. The first branching cue fired. Heron moved. Cleanly. The next came faster. He adjusted. Then another. And another. The pressure mounted until the choices began overlapping. Heron's movements remained sharp, but Corin knew what the clocks would show before the display settled. A small delay. Then a little more. The natural cost of filtering several good responses under stress. The final gate sounded. Heron stopped. His score appeared. Exactly where the model predicted. Corin felt his shoulders loosen. There. Reality. Measured correctly. The 9 ceilings had not vanished because one human had confused a primary gate. Myra stepped toward the entrance. Corin raised a hand. Wait. She stopped. He checked every timing feed himself. Main gate. Secondary gate. Floor pressure. Independent optical clock. All green. No shared controller. No common timing bus. No software link capable of copying the same error. Corin looked through the glass. Cadet Holt. Yeah. You will follow the exact same sequence. Same paths. The system randomizes them. Good. That answer should not have mattered. It did. Corin opened the door. Myra walked onto the test floor. The gates sealed behind her. Heron stood beside Corin in the review bay. She's the human. Yes. The one who broke the entry score. She did not break anything. Heron gave him a look. Corin corrected himself. The recorded result is under review. Right. The start light came on. Myra rolled one shoulder. Not dramatically. Just once, as though her uniform seam was bothering her. Corin noticed because she showed no other sign of stress. The first cue fired. Myra moved. Second cue. She changed course. A false rescue marker opened to her left. She never turned toward it. Heron leaned closer to the glass. Third branch. Floor alert. Blocked route. Moving casualty. Myra took one step backward instead of forward. Corin checked the feed. The system had not yet marked backward motion as the best response when she began it. His jaw membranes twitched. Possible preload, he said. Heron glanced at him. She guessed. We will see. The next sequence forced a choice between 2 exits. Myra started toward neither. Instead, she moved diagonally to a center strip. One exit locked, the other filled with projected debris. From the center strip, she turned and passed through the only clear gap. Correct. Again and again. The final gate clicked. Myra stopped. No pose. No smile. She looked through the glass. Corin did not look at her. He looked at the 4 independent clocks. They disagreed by tiny amounts. They all agreed on the only part that mattered. The first run had not been a timing error. Heron whispered, "That is outside the model." Corin touched the edge of his tablet. This time the habit did nothing. Myra lifted one hand. Corin opened the channel. Did I do it slow enough? Corin left the channel open for half a second too long. Heron heard Myra's question. So did the secondary timing team. One technician coughed into his sleeve. Another found sudden interest in a calibration panel. Corin closed the channel. Run integrity checks. The technicians moved at once. Myra remained on the test floor while 4 independent systems compared their records. Corin expected disagreement somewhere. A delay in one clock, a bad optical mark, a pressure strip reading motion before true commitment. Instead, the systems argued only over tiny fractions that did not matter. Every useful result pointed the same way. Myra had committed earlier than the model allowed. Heron folded his arms. She moved before the final route resolved. That would mean anticipation. Is that prohibited? No. Then what's the problem? Corin looked at him. The problem is that anticipation does not remove choice. Heron glanced through the glass. Myra had found a faded tape mark on the floor and was rubbing it with the toe of one shoe. She doesn't look concerned. That is not evidence. I didn't say it was. Corin touched his tablet. He disliked Heron slightly more than usual. The door opened. Myra stepped out. Done. No. She stopped. Corin brought up a new test design. The next sequence would not let her rely on a clean route. It would bury useful information inside useless information. False hazard tones, late visual cues, floor pulses that pointed toward choices already made unsafe by earlier events. Most high-level responders hated that test because it punished attention itself. The more signals they tried to track, the more time they lost deciding which ones mattered. Corin wanted exactly that loss. Myra looked over the setup. Those signals all happen at once. Near enough. And some are fake. Some are irrelevant. Same thing during an emergency. No, a false signal is incorrect. An irrelevant signal may be accurate but useless. Myra nodded. Fair. Corin waited for another remark. None came. That bothered him too. The rebuilt sequence began. A white path opened ahead. Myra took it. A tone sounded behind her. She kept moving. A warning flashed over the left wall. She changed direction. Then the floor sent a pressure pulse beneath her right foot, while a rescue icon appeared across the room. Myra slowed. Corin leaned toward the display. There. At last. Hesitation. For the first time since the review began, relief reached his chest. Then Myra stepped sideways. The rescue icon vanished. A barrier dropped where she had been heading. The pressure pulse proved irrelevant. She continued. Corin's relief lasted less than a breath. Heron pointed toward the playback. She slowed because she was checking the barrier. She could not know the barrier would drop. Maybe she didn't. Then why move? Heron looked at him. You're asking me. Corin did not answer. The next cluster arrived. 3 cues. 1 useful. Myra ignored the first 2. She did not even look toward the second. The hall recorded no meaningful delay. Corin stopped the run. Myra looked up at the control window. What? Stay where you are. She stayed. He replayed the cue. The first warning had announced a heat rise in a section she had already left. The second marked an exit that could no longer be reached before closure. The third indicated a route still inside her movement range. Corin played it again. The order was random. The timing was valid. Myra had treated the first two signals as dead before the system classified them that way. He opened the channel. How did you know which cues to discard? She looked at the frozen display. Most of them arrived too late to matter. Corin said nothing. Myra pointed toward the first warning. If I turn back for that, I lose the middle lane. Then the second. That door was already too far. And the pressure warning. Real. You ignored it. It warned me about where I wasn't going. Corin replayed the sequence from her position. He hated the answer because it was simple. Not easy. Simple. The Institute's model treated every urgent signal as something the mind had to receive, rank, and reject. Myra appeared to be killing choices earlier. Not after full comparison. Before. Corin changed the test. Harren noticed. You're increasing the load. I am separating anticipation from response speed. By making the course harder. By making prediction less useful. Myra heard that through the open channel. Prediction is always useful. Corin turned toward the glass. In controlled testing, we can remove it. Myra gave him a doubtful look. You can try. The words were not bold. That made them worse. Corin brought in specialist cadets. Not one. A group. Each had been selected because they represented a different strength the response faculty valued. One tracked moving objects better than almost anyone in the Institute. Another was known for rapid audio discrimination. A third could hold several route maps in working memory without mixing them. Corin placed them through the same decoy sequence. The first specialist was excellent until the cues began overlapping. Then came the familiar delay. Small, measured, expected. The second did better at sound prompts and worse at floor changes. The third held more routes open, but paid for it when several became urgent at once. Nothing about their performances was embarrassing. That mattered. They were doing exactly what trained biology was supposed to do. They were giving each problem enough attention to solve it. Myra watched from beside the review table. Her brass caliper lay inside its cloth sleeve near security. She glanced at it once. Corin noticed. You cannot use it. I know. Then why keep looking at it? I'm not. You just did. Myra looked at him. My grandfather used to say a clock gets nervous when someone watches it. Corin stared. She smiled a little. That was a joke. I understood. You didn't. He turned away. Harren made a sound that might have been a cough. Corin loaded Myra's sequence. This time, the specialists remained in the bay. He wanted witnesses. The first cue cluster fired. Myra moved. The second came sooner. She changed route. The third contained a rescue signal, a hazard line, and two prompts with no useful effect on her current path. Myra took the rescue route. No visible scramble. No rushed correction. Corin watched the commitment graph rather than her body. The system drew a bright trace showing when balance, shoulders, hips, and feet began favoring one answer. Myra's trace was strange. Not because it appeared impossibly early. Because it stayed broad. She was not committing to one future. She was standing where several futures remained cheap. Corin leaned closer. Harren, I see it. No, look at her center shift. Harren did. Myra entered a junction. Instead of choosing the fastest route, she stepped slightly toward the center of the floor. A barrier closed on one side. A warning killed another path. Myra turned through the remaining space with almost no correction. Harren frowned. She made the later choice easier. Corin felt his jaw membranes pull inward. He did not stop them fast enough. Myra saw. Their eyes met through the glass. She politely looked somewhere else. That irritated him for reasons he did not want to examine. The run ended. Her score crossed the model again, but Corin barely looked at it. He replayed the center shift. Again. Myra had not solved the final problem faster. She had changed the shape of the problem before it arrived. The distinction was small enough to fit inside one sentence. It was large enough to damage a doctrine. Corin closed the playback. New test. Harren turned toward him. You have your answer. I have a pattern. You have several. I do not yet know what they mean. Harren looked through the glass at Myra. She means you're going to keep doing this until she fails. Corin's voice hardened. I am going to keep doing this until the result is understood. Myra came out of the hole. She took a drink from the water station. Is there another one? Yes. Okay. You may stop. She lowered the cup. Would that help? Corin paused. No. Then I'm fine. That sentence landed harder than anything dramatic could have. Corin was the one escalating. Myra was simply staying. He ordered a commitment mapping trial. The measure hole changed around her. Wall panels moved. Floor lanes widened. Projected hazards began crossing possible paths. The test would now track not only the action Myra chose, but the actions her body quietly prepared to take. Corin expected preloading. That would solve much of the mystery. A cadet who favored one answer early could look fast later, because the real decision had already been made. The flaw was common and easy to expose. Myra stepped into the start zone. Corin spoke through the channel. Do not anticipate a fixed solution. She blinked. How? You are being instructed not to preselect a route. I wasn't going to. Your previous movement suggests otherwise. Myra looked at the shifting floor. No, I was trying not to get stuck. Corin almost answered. Then the first hazard crossed her path. The test began. A projected beam swept low. Myra stepped around it. A moving casualty marker changed direction. She adjusted. 2 exits lit at once. Her shoulders remained neutral. The mapping system found no hard preload. Then one exit closed. Myra was already standing where the closure cost almost nothing. Another hazard appeared behind her. She did not spin toward it. She shifted 1 foot and kept the forward lane open. Corin watched the commitment graph branch. Her body prepared several broad options. Not fully. Just enough. A foot angle. A loose shoulder. Weight held where it could move either way. The system kept waiting for the decisive moment it had been built to detect. Myra kept delaying that moment by making fewer decisions necessary. Corin lowered the tablet. For years, he had taught that dense emergencies were hard because too many valid choices survived too long. Myra seemed to ask a different question. Why let them survive? A projected barrier rose. She misread it. For the first time, truly. Myra stepped left. The lane blocked. She stopped hard and had to reverse. The delay appeared instantly. Corin felt relief so sharp it embarrassed him. There, he said. Harren glanced at the score. She made a mistake. Yes. Myra recovered. She crossed behind the moving casualty marker, gave up the shortest route, and used a longer path with a cleaner exit. Her final time worsened. Her overall efficiency barely did. Corin's relief vanished. Harren folded his arms. She loses well. Corin looked at him. What does that mean? She doesn't build a plan that requires every earlier choice to be right. Corin replayed the error. Myra had made the wrong move. No trick. No hidden foresight. No impossible reflex. She simply recovered without paying the kind of cost the model expected. That was somehow more troubling. Perfect performance could be dismissed as cheating. Recoverable imperfection could not. Corin ended the session. Myra came through the door, breathing a little harder now. Good. Human. Physical. Limited. She wiped sweat from her forehead with her sleeve. Was that one better? You failed a route. I noticed. You chose the wrong lane. I really noticed. Heron turned his head to hide a smile. Corin ignored him. You still finished above the expected efficiency range. Myra drank again. Does inefficient movement count against the score? Yes. Then I guess taking fewer bad steps helps. Corin stared at her. She had already worked that out. Of course she had. He dismissed the specialist group. The cadets left more quietly than they had arrived. One of them looked back at Myra before the door closed. Not afraid. Not yet. Interested. That was enough to change the room. The dispute had stopped being private. Corin pulled Myra's certification file onto his tablet. The hold he had signed that morning sat at the top. Reason, probable measurement fault. He deleted nothing. Instead, he added a new note. Repeated exception under independent instrumentation. His finger hovered. He added another line. Cause unresolved. Myra had gone to retrieve her cloth sleeve. Corin watched security return the brass caliper. She checked the jaws. Closed. Then slid it into her pocket. Heron stepped beside Corin. So what now? Corin looked through the glass at the measure hole. The problem was no longer that Myra had produced an impossible score. The problem was that every new test made the score look less impossible and the model look less complete. He hated that thought, so he tested the thought instead. Simulation may favor her. Heron stared at him. You think the entire hull is biased toward humans. Not toward humans, toward anticipatory movement. Isn't that part of responding? Not like this. Corin opened the request system. Response gallery vein appeared on his tablet. Real motion. Moving targets. Low-tier active training packets. No branching screen that could accidentally reward the way Myra shaped choices. Heron saw the request. His expression changed. That's not an entry test. No, she isn't certified for active lanes. I can authorize supervised evaluation. Heron looked at Myra. You're moving this out of simulation. Yes, because she keeps passing. Because I need a physical result the model cannot create. The words sounded reasonable. Corin needed them to sound reasonable. He sent the request. The system asked for justification. He typed one sentence. Laboratory architecture may be producing an artificial advantage. He submitted it. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the approval mark appeared. Myra walked over. Are we done? Corin locked his tablet. For today. That sounded suspicious. You have navigation. Her face changed at once. Oh, right. She started toward the door. Corin watched her go. Myra. She stopped and looked back. The next assessment will not be in the measure hall. Where's? Response gallery vein. Heron went still. Myra knew the name. Every advanced responder did. Her eyes shifted once toward Corin's tablet, then back to him. Active lane. Lowest tier. Still an evaluation. Yes. She considered that. Corin expected hesitation. Instead, Myra adjusted the strap of her bag. Do I need different shoes? Corin's jaw membranes tightened again. Yes. Good to know. She left for class. The door closed behind her. Heron waited until her footsteps were gone. Then he spoke quietly. You wanted a result the machine couldn't fake. Corin looked toward the empty doorway. That is correct. Heron's gaze moved to the response gallery approval on the tablet. And what happens if the machine isn't the problem? The approval for response gallery vein triggered a faculty safety review before Corin could leave the room. His tablet flashed amber. Supervised active lane exception. Corin stopped walking. The request had already spread beyond his desk. By morning, the gallery would contain observers. Not because anyone expected Myra to succeed, because several instructors wanted to watch the strange result finally fail under real motion. Corin should have found that reassuring. He did not. The next day, Myra arrived wearing the heavier response shoes he had ordered. She stepped through the security gate, placed her bag on the inspection shelf, and waited while a technician checked her gear. The brass caliper came out with everything else. The technician held it between two fingers. This again. Myra took it back after inspection. Still mechanical. Corin heard Heron make a quiet sound behind him. Myra slipped the tool into its cloth sleeve and placed it in the locker assigned to her. No one mentioned it again. Not yet. Response gallery vane was built around movement instead of screens. Open lanes crossed beneath ceiling emitters. Rescue frames moved along tracks. Training barriers rose from the floor without warning. Low-tier plasma packets traveled inside magnetic guide paths designed to teach one simple rule. Move away. Do not touch. Do not improvise with the packet. Do not try to be clever. Corin preferred rules that clear. He gathered Myra, Heron, two advanced cadets, and the lane supervisor at the entry rail. Today is not a competition, he said. Myra looked at Heron. Heron looked at Myra. Corin noticed. I mean that. Neither spoke. Corin continued. The packets remain inside controlled guide geometry. Your task is to preserve your own escape path while protecting the assigned moving target. If a packet blocks your route, evade. Myra nodded. No interception attempts. Wasn't planning one. Corin held her gaze. She seemed sincere. That helped. A little. The first run belonged to Heron. Corin wanted the control shown in real motion before Myra entered. Heron stepped into the lane. The emitters activated. A contained blue-white packet crossed the far side of the gallery. Heron moved away from it, reached the rescue frame, changed direction as a barrier rose, then exited through the safe corridor. Clean. Vast. Expected. His timing settled comfortably inside elite standards. The watching instructors relaxed. One even smiled. Corin almost did. Then Myra entered. The start tone sounded. A rescue frame began moving. Myra followed. The first packet crossed in front of her. She slowed rather than cutting behind it. Corin checked the lane map. Correct. A second projected hazard appeared along her exit. Myra changed course. Nothing impossible. Another barrier rose. She recovered. Still nothing impossible. Corin felt tension leave his shoulders. This was what he had wanted. A real environment. Real movement. Real physical limits. Myra reached the final marker and stepped behind the safe line. Her result appeared. Good. Very good. Not absurd. One instructor beside Corin exhaled. There. Corin looked at him. There what? Simulation bias. Corin should have agreed. Instead, he opened the movement trace. Myra's result had not broken the model, but the route itself was strange. She had traveled less distance than Heron. Not by running faster, by avoiding corrections. Corin enlarged the path. Heron stepped closer. She cut the wasted motion again. The instructor frowned. That is efficiency, not biology. Corin felt his jaw membranes tighten. Yes. He did not like how quickly he had answered. Myra returned to the rail. How bad? Not bad. That sounded painful. You performed within acceptable range. She smiled. Great. Corin waited for disappointment. None came. She reached for the water dispenser. The second run added moving hazards. Myra completed it. Again, no impossible burst. Again, very little wasted motion. The third run used a rescue target that changed direction without warning. Myra lost position once and had to circle around a barrier. Corin saw the error. So did everyone else. Good. Human. Then she adjusted before the next turn and regained most of the lost distance. The pattern from the measure hole remained. She could be wrong. She simply refused to make one wrong choice, expensive enough to ruin the next three. An instructor beside Corin folded his arms. She plans recovery. Corin shook his head. Not consciously at every point. How do you know? Because there is no time. The words left him before he considered them. Silence followed. Harren looked at him. Corin looked down at the movement trace. He had just defended Myra against his own doctrine. He closed the display. Reset the lane. The supervisor obeyed. The next configuration increased pressure across the whole group. Myra would move with 2 cadets in neighboring corridors, all tracking separate rescue targets. The lanes did not cross. Their choices still affected shared barrier timing. Personal performance became group performance. A bad decision in one corridor could close another cadet's path. Corin watched Myra hear the rule. For the first time, she asked for clarification. If I move early, can I close their route? Yes. If I wait too long, you may lose yours. She looked toward the other cadets. Got it. No joke. No shrug. That small change in her tone made Corin more uneasy than the jokes had. The run began. All 3 cadets moved. The first shared barrier rose. Myra delayed. The cadet on her right cleared. Myra crossed behind him. A training packet cut across the far corridor. The left cadet stopped. His rescue frame continued moving. Myra did not look at him. She shifted her own route toward the center. Corin saw why only after the next barrier appeared. Her new position prevented her lane from demanding the same gate timing as his. She had given the other cadet more room without entering his corridor. The supervisor leaned toward the controls. Was that instructed? No. Allowed. Corin checked. Yes. The sequence continued. Pressure climbed. The right side cadet missed a cue. Myra slowed. Her own time worsened. The shared barrier opened for him. He recovered. Corin watched the scoring model. Myra had sacrificed personal efficiency to preserve group flow. The old test would have marked the delay as weakness. The real lane exposed what the number missed. She was not trying to win the clock. She was trying to keep the system from cornering anyone. Harren spoke softly. She sees the next mistake before it belongs to anyone. Corin did not answer. The run ended. All 3 reached safe lines. Myra's individual score was lower than before. The group score was the best of the morning. No one smiled this time. Corin dismissed the cadets for a short break. Myra sat on a bench and retied one shoe. That was the entire act. No speech. No analysis. Just a loose lace. Across the gallery, instructors argued in low voices over models, standards, and whether the group result belonged in her certification file. Corin poured himself a cup of bitter faculty coffee. He drank half of it standing. For several minutes, the situation almost felt normal. A student had done well. Faculty disagreed about why. A lane supervisor complained about paperwork. Corin filed the latest result under supplementary evidence. He even began writing the line that would close the day. Real motion performance shows reduced anomaly relative to laboratory testing. The sentence sat on his screen. Reasonable. Defensible. Comforting. Then the lane supervisor called his name. Marshall. Corin looked up. A power diagnostic had appeared on the main board. Not an alarm. A minor routing warning. The supervisor tapped the display. One emitter is drawing uneven current. Disable it. It passed morning checks. Disable it anyway. The supervisor began the shutdown. Myra had finished tying her shoe. She stood. Are we done? Corin looked toward the warning. Yes. Then the board cleared itself. The supervisor frowned. Vault vanished. Corin did not like that. Keep it offline. The supervisor entered the command. The emitter accepted it. A green mark appeared. Corin looked back at Myra. Done. She picked up her water bottle. Then a faculty observer objected. We have one approved sequence remaining. Corin faced him. The emitter produced a power warning. On a separate lane. It shares routing hardware. The system cleared it. Corin looked at the supervisor. The supervisor hesitated. Technically, yes. Corin hated the word technically. The observer opened his tablet. If you end the evaluation early, the result remains incomplete. That mattered. An incomplete result gave both sides room to argue forever. Corin looked across the gallery. One final sequence. Low-tier packets. Standard movement. The questionable emitter disabled. Shared routing green. Myra waited near the rail. Problem. Corin should have stopped. Years later, he would know that. In that moment, he saw a clean way to finish the dispute. One final run. Myra put the bottle down. Okay. Heron moved closer to Corin. You sure? No. It was the first honest answer Corin had given all day. He authorized the sequence. The last configuration was simpler than the group trial. Myra alone. One moving rescue frame. Several barriers. Active packets kept inside their usual guide lanes. Nothing designed to exceed entry-level physical limits. Corin repeated the rule anyway. Evade every packet. Myra stepped into position. I heard you the first time. No interception. She looked toward the nearest emitter. Still wasn't planning one. The gate closed behind her. The start tone sounded. Myra moved. The first barrier rose. She passed it. A training packet crossed ahead at lane speed, its magnetic sheath glowing bright around the contained plasma. Myra gave it space. Correct. The rescue frame turned. She followed. A second packet entered the far guide path. Then the power board flickered. Corin's coffee cup stopped halfway to his mouth. The supervisor swore. The disabled emitter had not fired. Something upstream had. Abort. The supervisor hit shutdown. The gallery tone changed. Myra stopped moving. The rescue frame froze. Every barrier began retracting. The first active packet vanished into its quench gate. The second did not. Its guide light blinked. Once, then shifted sideways. Corin put down the cup. Why is it moving? The supervisor's hands flew across the console. It lost the guide lock. Kill the packet. I'm trying. The magnetic containment remained active. The path did not. The packet drifted out of the marked lane. Slowly at first. Then the damaged field pulled it toward an adjacent guide rail. Two cadets were standing behind the emergency boundary there. They had been waiting for their own evaluation. A warning tone sounded. Floor arrows lit. The cadets obeyed them. That was the problem. The arrows assumed the packet was still inside its approved corridor. It was not. Corin saw the geometry change on the board. The cadets were being directed toward the same side the loose packet was entering. Stop! His voice cracked across the gallery speakers. The cadets froze. Worse, the packet kept moving. Corin hit the emergency field control. Nothing happened. The damaged route had already left the recovery zone. Heron ran toward the side access gate. Too far. Corin searched the board for another answer. None arrived fast enough. Myra moved. Not toward the exit arrow. Across it. Corin saw her change direction and felt something cold pass through his chest. No! She ignored the shout. For the first time all day, Myra broke a direct movement command. But she did not run toward the plasma itself. She ran toward the responder station built into the lane wall. Her hand struck the release. A shield panel dropped free. Approved emergency gear. Corin understood half a second too late. Myra caught the grip. Turned. The packet crossed outside the guide path. Its containment sheath struck the edge of the shield. Myra did not try to stop it. She changed its angle. That was all. One controlled turn. One step. One release toward the emergency quench mouth built into the floor. The packet entered. The quench system fired. Blue-white light vanished behind the safety shutters. Silence hit the gallery. Both cadets remained standing. Myra stepped backward behind the nearest safe stripe. She lowered the shield. She did not move again. Corin stared at the board. A single timing value had frozen on one surviving stream. From containment breach to quench release. 0.46 seconds. The number meant almost nothing by itself. Corin knew that. The event around it meant everything. Myra had not been faster than the plasma. She had not caught it with bare hands. She had not ignored safety. She had recognized that the safety map had become wrong. Then she had used the equipment exactly once. Heron reached the side gate at last. He stopped. There was nothing left for him to do. Corin opened the gallery channel. His first attempt produced no sound. He tried again. You were instructed not to intercept. Myra looked toward the two cadets. Both were unharmed. Then she looked back at Corin. The lane stopped being the problem. No pride. No challenge. She set the shield on the floor. Corin's jaw membranes pulled hard toward his throat. He did not try to hide them. The faculty observers had gone silent. One of them finally whispered, "She caught it." Corin turned on him. "No." The word came sharper than intended. She redirected the containment sheath with responder gear. The observers stared. Corin continued, because accuracy suddenly mattered more than dignity. She did not stop the packet. She changed where it was going. Myra heard him. She nodded once, as if thanking him for correcting the description. That nearly broke something in Corin. The supervisor recovered first. "Seal the gallery." Corin looked at him. The man was right. "Seal it." Doors locked. External feeds cut. Corin ordered every recording preserved. The damaged controller was isolated. The surviving mechanical backups were marked for review. Then the first problem appeared. The timestamps disagreed. Corin frowned. Again. The supervisor brought up the streams. The main controller showed one interval. The optical log showed another. A power surge had corrupted part of the sequence. The exact moment of the guide failure could not be trusted from the primary system. One observer seized on it at once. Then we don't have a valid response interval. Corin looked through the glass at Myra. She had retrieved her water bottle. Nothing else. No celebration. No shaking hands held up for inspection. She drank. Then she noticed the evidence discussion. Her eyes moved toward the locker wall. Corin followed the glance. The brass caliper sat inside its cloth sleeve with the rest of her personal gear. He remembered the tiny engraved scale. Mechanical. Independent. No battery. His chest tightened. Do not touch her locker. Myra lowered the bottle. I know. Corin moved to the security station himself. Seal every personal item in place until evidence review. The security officer blinked. Even clothing. Everything. Myra looked toward her bag. My homework's in there. Corin stared at her. She gave a small shrug. Just saying. Heron laughed once. Not because anything was funny. Because the alternative seemed worse. Corin looked back at the corrupted timestamps. The physical event had destroyed his last clean excuse. But now the one measurement capable of proving exactly how badly the model had failed might be sitting inside the pocket of the person he had spent 2 days trying to disprove. He ordered the Doctrine Rotunda notified. Not a normal faculty review. A full standards inquiry. The request form asked for the reason. Corin stood over the field for several seconds, then typed, "Possible universal model failure." His finger stopped above submit. Harren watched him. "So that's where we are." Corin did not answer. He pressed the control. The request left his tablet. Across the sealed gallery, Myra sat on the bench beside the untouched locker wall. The shield she had used remained on the floor inside the lane. 2 cadets stood alive behind the emergency boundary. And for the first time in Corin's career, the oldest rule in his field had become the thing under investigation. Corin's standards inquiry was accepted before the gallery doors reopened. The Doctrine Rotunda sent back one instruction: preserve every independent record. Corin read it twice. Then he walked to Myra's locker. The security officer waited beside him. Myra stood several steps away with Harren and the 2 cadets she had protected. One of them was still pale. The other kept looking through the gallery glass at the shield lying near the safe stripe. Corin opened the locker under witness seal. The cloth sleeve sat on top of Myra's folded jacket. He removed it carefully. The brass caliper looked almost foolish in his hand. No screen, no status light, no network mark, no academy seal. Just metal, spring tension, an engraved scale, and a narrow recording strip Myra had clipped into its side before the day began. Corin looked at her. "You activated this morning, for the whole session?" "Yes." "Why?" Myra glanced at the damaged control board. "Because sometimes electronic clocks argue." Harren turned away. Corin did not. "When did you decide that?" "My grandfather decided it before I was born." "That was not my question." "I know." Corin looked back at the instrument. The recording strip had advanced through the session using its own spring-driven mechanism. No link to the gallery. No shared power. No command clock. No reason to inherit the controller's damaged timestamps. The security officer placed an evidence tray on the table. Corin set the caliper inside it. Myra's eyes followed the tool. Not worried. Not possessive. Just attentive. Corin noticed. "You will get it back." "I assumed." "It is evidence." "Then don't bend the scale." Corin almost told her the Institute knew how to handle mechanical instruments. Then he remembered that he had called the instrument irrelevant. He said nothing. The Rotunda ordered a mechanical standards technician to the gallery. She arrived carrying tools older than some academy buildings and seemed delighted to see something that did not require a software key. Corin was not delighted. He watched her open the recording housing. Harren stood beside him. The protected cadets had been moved to medical review even though neither showed injury. Corin insisted. One of them, a young balloon named Sarek, resisted leaving. "I'm fine. You were inside a failed active lane event." "I'm standing." "That is not a medical standard." Sarek looked toward Myra. She saw it before the arrows changed. Corin felt the words settle in him. "We will discuss that later." Sarek hesitated. She didn't even look scared. Myra across the room heard him. "I was busy." Sarek blinked. Then the medic guided him away. One named cadet. One living voice. That was what all the doctrine language had almost hidden. Corin watched the door close behind him. The issue was no longer whether an old academic model had made a mistake. A bad model had nearly sent Sarek into the wrong path. Myra had not beaten a theory. She had noticed a child of another world standing where the theory said he was safe. The mechanical technician cleared her throat. "I have a usable strip." Corin turned. She laid the brass caliper's record beneath a visual reader. A simple sequence of marks appeared. The Academy synchronized the strip against the few surviving physical events that had not depended on the damaged controller. Barrier drop, emergency tone, quench shutter. Each gave them a fixed point. The technician aligned the record. Corin felt every person in the room become still. The disputed interval appeared. It matched the surviving optical evidence. Not perfectly. Nothing independent ever matched perfectly. That was why it mattered. Different method. Different power source. Same event. The mechanical strip confirmed the sequence had begun before the damaged controller claimed Myra could have made the choice. Harren read the result. So the controller was wrong. Corin shook his head. Partly. That helps her. It makes the problem worse. Harren looked at him. Corin pointed to the reconstructed timeline. The controller did not invent her movement. The technician nodded. The physical record agrees. Corin enlarged the sequence. Myra changing direction. Opening the responder station. Taking the shield. Meeting the failing containment edge. Turning it toward the quench system. Every step existed on separate records. The clocks argued about tiny pieces. They did not argue about the order. Corin sent the evidence package to the rotunda. This time, he did not add an explanation. The evidence no longer needed his help. The hearing began before sunset. Myra sat at one side of the circular chamber. Corin sat opposite her. Harren remained behind the witness rail. The brass caliper rested on the evidence table between them. Above it hung the 9 ceilings. The old Academy model filled the central display. Corin had seen those curves hundreds of times. They had always looked clean. Today they looked crowded. The council chair reviewed the reconstructed gallery event first. No speech, no theory, just movement. Myra's path appeared in white. The loose packet appeared in blue. The programmed evacuation arrows lit red. At the moment the guide geometry failed, the arrows continued pointing along an assumption that had already become false. Myra's route crossed them. The chair froze the image. Cadet Holt disobeyed the evacuation indicator. Corin answered before anyone else. Yes. Did she disobey your spoken order? Yes. The chair looked at him. You instructed her to evade. I did. And not intercept. Yes. Myra sat quietly. The chair turned toward her. Why did you leave the evacuation path? The path stopped being safe. Why? The packet wasn't where the path thought it was. And why take the shield? Myra looked toward the frozen image. Because the cadets didn't have time to clear. The council chair waited. Did you believe you could stop the packet? No. A few faculty members shifted. The chair leaned forward. Then what did you believe you could do? Move it. Where? Somewhere empty. The answer landed with less force than the event. That was Myra's strange gift. She made the impossible sound like cleanup. Corin looked toward the evidence table. The brass jaws of the caliper were closed, exactly as Myra always left them. A doctrine specialist opened the earlier measure hall records. The decoy tests came first, then the specialist comparisons, then commitment mapping. The same pattern appeared in all of them. Not supernatural speed. Not instant thought. Reduction. Myra removed useless futures before they became urgent enough to demand equal attention. She changed position. Preserved exits. Avoided expensive commitments. Recovered from errors without letting one mistake poison the next choice. The specialist pointed toward the model. Our framework assumes the major selection cost occurs after competing options become active. Corin nodded. That assumption is built into nearly every test. And the human. Corin looked at Myra. She appears to shift part of that cost earlier. Appears. Corin touched the edge of his tablet. The old habit. This time he stopped halfway. He lowered his hand. Does. The chamber went quiet. The specialist changed the display. The 9 ceilings remained. Below them appeared species comparison data from the Academy's record. Hundreds of lineages, shared patterns, shared collapse points, shared architecture in ways the Institute had treated as universal. The chair spoke. Marshal D. Hal, you signed the restriction on Cadet Holt. Yes. State your reason. Corin knew the exact wording. He had written it himself. Her result exceeded the accepted natural commitment boundary. I classified equipment error as more likely than biological exception. Was that decision unreasonable? Corin looked at the old data. No. Several faculty members relaxed. Then Corin continued. It became unreasonable when I kept treating repeated evidence as new forms of the same error. The room tightened again. The chair studied him. Corin did not look away. He had spent days searching for a machine that would confess. The machines had refused. Now the only useful question left was whether he would. The chair brought up the ancient charter. The ceremonial section appeared first. Oran Sale, Founderera Doctrine. The old teaching that living minds met fixed boundaries because ordered nature required limits. Modern instructors did not teach it as religion. Not openly. They called it history. The language had changed. The certainty had not. The 9 ceilings had inherited that certainty one generation at a time. The chair highlighted the oldest line. Then the newest, scientific version. Different words. Same claim. Universal. Corin felt his jaw membranes tighten. The title of an old lecture came back to him. Limits given to living minds. He had laughed at the wording when he was a student. Too ceremonial. Too old. Too close to faith. Then he had spent his career teaching the same belief with charts. A council member spoke. We have tested every lineage in our record. Corin looked at the display. No. The council member frowned. Corin pointed toward Myra. We have tested every lineage in our record except the ones we have not. Silence. The sentence was embarrassingly obvious. That made it devastating. The member tried again. The convergence remains real. Yes. So the ceilings remain useful. Yes. The council chair watched Corin carefully. What changes? Corin looked at the word universal. He had defended that word more fiercely than the data beneath it. He reached toward the display. Remove that. Nobody moved. Corin enlarged it himself. Universal biological ceilings. He selected the first word. Delete. The heading became biological ceilings. He stopped. Myra looked at him. Corin shook his head. Still too strong. He edited again. Observed response ceilings. The chamber stayed silent. 3 short lines appeared beneath the heading as the council clerk entered the amendment. Observed in the sample. Reliable within the sample. Unproven beyond the sample. Corin read them once, then signed. The mark attached his name to the correction. The same name already attached to Myra's restriction. Both would remain. That felt right. The council chair turned toward Myra. Your certification hold is withdrawn. Myra nodded. Thanks. One instructor raised a hand. If human response architecture differs this much, automatic advancement may be appropriate. Corin looked toward him. Myra answered first. No. The instructor blinked. You have just demonstrated performance beyond the current advanced standard. In one kind of emergency. Across several tests. Tests you kept changing. The instructor leaned forward. Exactly. Myra's expression stayed calm. That doesn't mean you should throw every human into worse danger. The instructor looked toward Corin. Corin said nothing. Myra continued. One bad emergency gave me one usable option. She pointed toward the frozen gallery image. That's all. You protected 2 cadets. Yes. You redirected an active training packet. With equipment. You crossed the academy limit. Myra looked at the new heading above the council. No, I crossed a line your chart drew. The room went very still. Myra seemed to realize everyone was staring at her. Her shoulders drew in slightly. She reached toward the evidence table, then stopped because the caliper had not yet been released. The tiny motion told Corin more than any speech could. Praise bothered her. Attention bothered her. Danger had not made her reckless. Vindication did not either. The council chair noticed the same thing. What placement do you request? Myra thought. The one I qualified for. Nothing higher. No. Why? I still have things to learn. Harren lowered his head. Corin knew he was hiding another smile. The council chair approved standard advancement. No special human tier. No unrestricted hazard access. No new myth replacing the old one. That was important. Corin had watched institutions correct mistakes before. They often ran too far in the other direction. The dangerous species became the miracle species. The incapable student became the chosen one. Certainty changed uniforms and survived. Myra refused to help them do that. The hearing ended with a new standards directive. Future certification language would separate measured population limits from claims about all natural minds. Human cadets would use the same safety rules as everyone else unless specific evidence justified a change. The response gallery fault would be reviewed as a systems failure independent of Myra's performance. And no active lane evaluation could proceed after a routing warning until the shared power path had been physically checked. Corin signed that one too. Harren met him outside the rotunda. You look terrible. Thank you. You're welcome. Corin leaned against the wall. For once, his jaw membranes stayed tight. He had stopped caring who saw. Harren held out Myra's cloth sleeve. Evidence released. Corin took it. The brass caliper felt heavier now. Not because it had changed. Because he had. He found Myra near the stairwell. She was checking her class schedule. Cadet Holt. She looked up. Corin held out the sleeve. Your property. Myra took it carefully. She opened the cloth, checked the jaws, closed, then put it back. Corin watched the familiar motion. You trusted that more than our clocks. No. He frowned. Myra adjusted the strap of her bag. I trusted having another clock. Corin had no answer. She started down the stairs. Myra. She stopped. Corin almost apologized. The word reached the edge of his mouth. Then he realized an apology would make the moment about him. Instead he asked, afternoon navigation. Myra checked her tablet. Missed it. I can authorize the absence. I know. What will you do? Wait. Corin stared. Myra gave him a small wave and continued downstairs. Harren appeared behind him. Historic standards hearing. Yes. Ancient doctrine corrected. Yes. Human proves a foundational biological assumption incomplete. Yes. And she wants dinner. Corin looked toward the empty stairwell. She missed lunch too. Weeks later, Corin stood again in front of a response class. A new group of cadets filled the measure hall seats. The old 9 ceilings diagram remained on the wall. He had chosen not to remove it. History was still useful when it admitted being history. Beside the old heading sat the amendment. Observed response ceilings. One student raised a hand. Marshall, are the old curves wrong? Corin looked at the chart. No. The student seemed confused. Then why was the wording changed? Corin walked to the display. He could have told them about Myra. He could have shown the plasma recording. He could have turned the class into a legend lesson and watched every student stare at the human exchange cadet in the next building. He did none of those things. He tapped the sample label beneath the curves, because a map can be accurate and still end before the world does. The student wrote that down. Corin almost stopped him. Then did. Actually, don't write that. The student looked up. Why? It sounds better than it is. A few cadets laughed. Corin changed the slide. A case record appeared. No dramatic title. No image of Myra holding the shield. No words about impossible humans. Just the corrected standard and the evidence chain that required it. At the bottom sat his own original restriction order. Signed. Visible. One cadet noticed. You made the first ruling. Yes. Why leave your name on it? Corin looked at the class. Because I made it. That was enough. After class, he returned to the review bay. The hall was quiet. A technician had replaced the faulty routing hardware. The timing gates clicked through their self-test. Once, then once again. Correctly this time. Corin sat at his desk and opened Myra's certification file. The red hold mark was gone. In its place sat a plain status line. Advanced Response, CLEARED. Below it was the amended standards note. No special warning. No mythic classification. No claim that humans ignored natural law. Just a record showing that the old law had never been as large as its authors believed. Corin closed the file. Across campus, through the review bay window, cadets crossed toward evening classes. Myra moved among them. Small. Ordinary. Her bag hung from one shoulder. As she reached the far steps, she stopped. She pulled the cloth sleeve from her pocket. The brass caliper caught the last light through the glass. Myra checked the jaws, closed them, slipped the tool back into her pocket. Then she disappeared through the classroom door.